So I wanted to take the opportunity to bring Michaela Schell back in to talk about the Limitless Networking Conference. We had her on a few episodes ago on the brand, the brand spotlight kind of concept, and talked about the Limitless brand and what it took to build that and what that looked like. And since then, obviously, COVID-19, there's some other things going on in the country that have not only, put her in a position to postpone and reschedule at one point, but now also to officially cancel / postpone for the remainder of 2020. So I wanted to bring her back in, talk a little bit about, kind of what led into that decision, but also, how that connects back to the true authenticity of her brand. Michaela's got this brand and it's dialed in and it's very specific as to what she's trying to do and the level of quality she's trying to bring in this solopreneur, this entrepreneur type industry. So again, wanted to bring her back in and let her speak to that and how, this decision was made and how it directly connects back to the brand retro mindset. So Michaela, thank you again for coming in. Welcome. So Michaela, thanks for joining me again on the Brand Retro podcast. Kind of what I wanted to talk with you about today is just kind of revisit the concept of the Limitless conference and your recent decision to cancel it, or I should say postpone. Just kind of what all went into that decision, what kind of brought you to the point of saying, I am going to cancel it or at least postpone it for the time being, and just kind of your position in the whole decision-making process to not only, potentially do the right thing for what's going on with COVID-19 and all that good stuff, but also how that decision was kind of made to protect and impact the brand long-term.
Right. Yeah. It's really fresh. We just made the announcement on Monday and today's Wednesday that we're recording this. So, super fresh decision. And, we can start maybe with a little backstory on to get into why it was canceled. We had originally, it was in April, we had rescheduled to June 23rd. And so it had been a long, COVID stuff started in end of February. We didn't know if we should reschedule right away. We kind of held true to that April date for a while. All of us, the whole country, not knowing what was going to happen. Is this going to grow? Is it going to, just kind of fade away? Got closer to that April date, said, okay, we can't do this. So we postponed to unknown. We didn't know the date at that point because, again, uncertainty, right? That's what this whole pandemic has brought us, uncertainty. So, postponed without future date in mind. We were just going to wait and see what happened. So as we got towards the end of May, our North Dakota governor opened up large event spaces again, said, hey, we can have large events. It came with a bunch of stipulations. For Limitless in our conference, it meant instead of having 200 to 300 people like we originally could, that number was down to 104. So much smaller than expected. I, as the event planner, was forced with a decision of, okay, when do we have this now? Do we open it up right now? This was end of May. Do we do it sooner than later? Do we continue to wait and hope for something different, larger capacity? And the longer we waited, the more people lost momentum, the more other, people's plan changed, things like that. So, there were so many decisions that went into the factor of when it was. And we ultimately decided on June 23rd. And we're like, okay, we're a go. Conference is on, with a ton of excitement. But as we chose that date, we ended up running into more and more problems in, just challenges that we were facing in getting this off the ground. Again, our attendance was limited. What that did now was, from a sponsorship standpoint, we had sponsors lined up. They were promised to be in front of 200-300 people. Well, now that went down for them. They paid X amount. We had to change a lot of our format just to keep people safe. So there wasn't the connection and mingling and, sponsors being able to get really in front of people because they had to stay away from people. So that changed for them. So, talking about doing the right thing, and I think all of us have experienced this during the COVID situation, is we've had tickets or we bought something or something happened. And, just like for these sponsors and, all of us have been tied to some contract or some whatever it would be. So I made the decision to release them from that contract because this was unprecedented, right? We didn't know. So that's, the decision to cancel was twofold. And that brings about the first fold, and it's financial. Like, I think we forget that a lot of events aren't just events, they're small businesses. So we're working with finances constantly, and we have to balance the number of attendees that are buying the tickets to bring in the revenue to cover the costs of, food, facility rental, all of that kind of stuff. Our ticket numbers were already way lower than anticipated, but our costs are the same. The venue costs the same whether you have one person in there or 1,000 people in there. A lot of those things, speakers cost the same, those type of things. So then losing our sponsorship dollars on top of that, the reduced number, from a financial standpoint, it actually made sense to cancel over have it. We lost money either way. We actually lost less money not having the event. We would have lost more money having the event. So I was super transparent with our people on that decision. And then the second part of that decision was, and the most important to me, was the value for our guests. We set out on this mission, like, yes, to have this conference, this event, but it was to further solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and business leaders and help them grow, and really do that through not only training, but connection with other people, bringing them together with other solopreneurs like myself, like yourself, that we can meet and learn from each other and grow. And when you have, that number go down, and then now you have to separate everybody, like we lost any kind of, networking things that we had planned. Everybody's seated far apart at tables, so they can't even chat and mingle at tables. Like, that was the biggest part of this event, is bringing them together to connect and support each other. And that's not there. So, I couldn't justify asking them to spend $159 on a ticket and bring, and they just lost half the value for that. Like, that wasn't right for me to do to them too. So, combine those two things and 10,000 other little things that we're working with behind the scenes. And, the sad decision was made that it had to be done for this year.
I mean, obviously I was planning on presenting there, and I've been following this pretty closely, having worked with you on it. So I wasn't happy by any means when I saw it being canceled, but I was impressed to some degree, because I saw you doing something that was not only right for the timing and right for the business and the finance part of it, but I saw you doing something that was right for the brand. Because everything we had talked about going into, and even, somewhat, being on the inside of what that vision was like for you, I know there was a certain level of quality and a certain presentation and a certain A+ type delivery that you were shooting for. And with all these different variables coming into play, it was starting to erode the vision of it. And as a business owner, as a the decision maker in this, I know what it's like to kind of continually back up on your vision of something and start to decide if it's worth it or not anymore. Because if I can't deliver it the way I want it delivered, is it the same? Is it going to deliver the same impact or the same quality? And I think there's a breaking point. And for you to identify that breaking point and protect the brand and kind of, again, come back to that initial idea, that brand retro mindset, to kind of preserve the concept. I mean, it's just smart business. It's good for your brand. It's not like any of this stuff was really within your control. So I think you did the right thing. And if, I'm going to ask you this question too, but I think if nothing else, it probably just buys you more time to really do it the way you want to do it. Because now you're not going to be doing it with those limitations in mind. So,
Right.
So what's the plan going forward? What's kind of your next steps? I mean, I know it's only a couple days.
$1 million question. Well, I want to touch on one thing first, because you said the key word, and it was protection. And that has been woven in through this a lot, from a brand standpoint. And what the first decision that we made before even rescheduling was, do we go virtual or not? When all this started happening in March. And I had a good friend who is also a speaker at this event. I actually talked to a lot of people about this, like people who are doing virtual events, people who are in this scope, like what's the best course of action? I'd gotten a lot of advice and all of it was good advice. But one that I got is a friend of mine had just said, this is your first event. Remember that this is the first one. And when it comes to a brand, this was essentially, I had been building the Limitless brand for a year before this conference actually went off. So I had some of that, brand foundation behind me. But the conference was essentially the launch, the open house, the grand opening, the, big, huge, fireworks, whatever of the Limitless brand was the actual conference that one day. And if it was wrong, if it wasn't quite right, if it wasn't perfect, now the way that this brand is formulated in people's heads is going to be wrong or just less, maybe not wrong, but less than what it could have been. And then going forward from that launch, that conference, if they don't have the big explosion, incredible, amazing experience going forward, now I'm having to try to build off of a shaky foundation, build off of something that wasn't done correctly the first time. So even in the decision for us to not go virtual, which a lot of events did, I made the decision to not because this was our very first launch. If we would have had a conference last year and had this huge, awesome, impactful, fun conference that fit with the Limitless brand perfectly, well, then this happens this year. I can lean on that solid foundation of a brand I already built to pivot. And okay, we have a virtual event, and we all know virtual events they can be great, but they're not as good as in person, right? Nobody loves to sit in front of a screen for a full day at a conference. It just doesn't quite bring what you want it to. But people would have done that and they would have been okay with it being a little bit less, more lackluster than it normally would have been, because they had already had the first one, already had the big one, already had this, they knew what Limitless was, they knew what it meant, they knew the feeling surrounded by it. But doing, not canceling it this year, if we would have had it and it would have been, barely 100 people with no sponsors and half of the activities we had planned not been a go, they didn't get to connect with everybody. Well, now they're just sitting in a boring conference room listening all day long. Like, we've all been to those conferences. They suck. Nobody wants to go back to those. You're forced to go by your boss and you go to this big corporate thing every year and sit there bored and play on your phone the whole time. Like, that's not what this was designed to be. So, yes, we had that financial reason and, the value reason, but the protection of this brand and what it could be moving forward was woven throughout all of that. And without having a kick-ass conference for the very first one to build people's belief and love in this thing, it would have been, that could have solidified our future and there's no more conferences. Because how do you build from that, and try to bring people back and convince them that, hey, it was really supposed to be good. It just couldn't be good. Yeah, so it's hard to backpedal like that.
You would have spent the next, between now and whenever the next conference is going to be, you would have spent that time promoting while apologizing, right, for the first one. Right. Now it's going to be the real one.
Kind of crappy. Hang in there, believe in me, trust me that it's going to be better. Where now I didn't have to do that. So
I think one thing worth mentioning, though, is the fact that what Limitless is intended to be is it's intended to be different than all those other ones.
Right. That was when we sat down for our first coffee, it was like, I don't want this to be the same boring conference.
So if you were asking people to step into an experience they've had before, which is, to quote you, one of those boring ones, I don't think you would have to be so apologetic about it because they kind of know what that looks like. They know what they're stepping into. But because this was intended to be different, better, and more impactful and whatever, now it's a less than experience because you already set the stage. You already raised the bar in how you promoted it, which is a good thing. But it also, speaks volumes as to why it was a good decision and why you probably had to pull the plug on this for this year to make sure that you could deliver that, so that the hype would match the delivery, which that was the whole point. So
Exactly. And that was one of the reasons why I chose to be really transparent about it. And, two reasons. Like one, I want people to really understand where we're coming from, that it wasn't taken lightly and it wasn't just like a, oh, COVID thing, and two, to really, we're all solopreneurs. We're all doing this small business, and we keep seeing these things being canceled, or we keep seeing, hearing about small businesses struggling or failing during this time, but we don't hear why. And I think it's, this whole conference was about learning from each other. And I had an opportunity, a sad one, but an opportunity to teach and be super transparent and share. And hopefully it gave people a better understanding of just small businesses in general. And I mean, we're seeing events canceled all over the place, right? Red River Valley Fair and, Minnesota State Fair and all these places. And like, they don't want to cancel. Businesses don't want to close. That's the last thing we want to do. But here are the reasons why. And hopefully it can help other people learn, better understand, use it as an example when they're going through this. Like, oh, I have people to talk to that have gone through this. Or I heard why Michaela made that decision. I need to think about it from this perspective, like she did. What do I need to look at? It was that transparency was an opportunity for me to practice what I preach, right? We're here to teach and train solopreneurs how to be better and how to grow. And we grow through failure, through setbacks, through things like that. And felt like I really had to share what that was. And that all fit back into the Limitless brand too. Like we're going to learn more from each other at this conference than we will even from all the speakers, like just hearing those kind of stories. So I wanted to make sure that I was sharing that story in all honesty too.
So in the spirit of Limitless, and again, just commending you on, making the decision to protect and be consistent with what the Limitless brand is, what's kind of the plan going forward? I'm working with you on a couple different things. I don't know if I should throw this out there, but the blogs, the content, offering more resources. I know you probably don't have all that stuff dialed in, but can you tell us between now and, whenever the next event's going to be, how are we going to keep this Limitless train rolling?
I'm going to be super transparent with you now too, Mike. So this week, probably next week, aside from this podcast and wrapping up, like there's a lot of things to wrap up when you cancel a conference, right? Like, oh my gosh, you're refunding tickets and all this kind of stuff. I'm resting. Like I told myself, like you just have to, because, especially, planning one is just an extreme feat of exhaustion sometimes anyways. And then, for the last 3 weeks, we've been pushing this boulder uphill and just continuing to try to solve problems. So I said, okay, I'm just going to let my brain just settle from this. One, because I just need to rest. And two, I do better when I have time to think about things. So, I have and always have had so many ideas spinning. We are launching this blog that will still continue to go, voices from other solopreneurs. But, I have 10,000 ideas in my head. Now I know if I'm just like, okay, I got to keep this going. I got to, I need to make this happen. I'm going to push ideas that maybe aren't right just out of sheer, I need to be doing something. I need to be running with something. I need to be providing more to my people instead of taking the time to reflect on what has all happened. Here, I've been hearing so much. Oh my gosh, shout out to all the attendees and all the people who have supported me through this, like hearing so much feedback from them of, their thoughts and what they're looking forward to and things like that. So I'm taking that into account and to just, sit with this for a few weeks. It might be a little bit longer, figure out where the right place is for us, what that looks like, what people need, and be able to pull out of the, thousands of ideas and things that I want to do in my head. What are the ones that match our brand, that are truly what people need, are what I can accomplish as a, party of one, all of those kinds of things, and do it after learning from this conference too. Like, how can I be more financially strategic, and how can, I add more value and things like that. So at this point, I don't know the exact path of where that will be. And from a conference planning standpoint, if there wasn't another event, that's challenging too, with the COVID stuff that we're dealing with. to have it next spring. Well, what happened this spring with all this, we don't know. It's, again, just such uncertain times. So to be able to plan something is really challenging as far as a date and things like that. So we're working with seeing what this virus does and our economy does, and, all of this type of stuff too, before we make any decisions. But, that's the $1 million question I get asked from people. And I have this like gut reaction to like tell them all the cool things that I have planned, because I want them to like think, oh, she's still going and she's still doing all this stuff, and she's, got all these ideas, and Limitless isn't gone. And, like but at the same time, like, I don't know. I really don't know, just because I want to sit on that and reflect. And, part of me feels like, oh, that's the wrong move. I need to have something for people because they want what's next. But it's the move that I have to do for myself, and to be able to deliver something quality. And maybe that's just a personality thing for me. Like, I know that I'll promise 10,000 things because I just love doing, and then they won't be right. So I know that for myself, I just need to kind of shut my mouth on all the thousands of things I want to do to really reflect. That's my answer is I don't know, but there are a lot of things coming down the pipe, hopefully. So
it's smart to just take a step back and let the dust settle, get the attempt of the first one out of the way. Like you said, get the refund.
Cry the tears.
Just let that pass, put a little distance between that and when you decide to, kick the dust off it and get it going again. And I think it's understandable, but I just think it's smart, because we don't know what's going to happen with, businesses and budgets and all these different things, right, as a result of, the COVID pandemic, and even all this stuff that's going on with like the riots, and like there's so
much stuff in people's brains right now.
Yeah. So to sit back and just kind of read the landscape a little bit and take a little time is not a bad idea at all. So, well, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. And obviously we'll be in touch and talking about whatever updates need to be put out on the Limitless website, so that people can check that out and see what kind of the decision is from there. But right. So you just let me know what you need from me. And as always, we'll continue to support, the Limitless conference and how we proceed with that, because I think it's a great idea. I think it's necessary. And I think it's something that is different and abstract in comparison to all these other conferences you go to. They're not that they're bad conferences, but this is next level. This is going to be something pretty cool. So
thanks, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to share the story and share the continued story of how it changes. So
yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Michaela, thank you again for being on the show. It's great to have you on, and everything you're doing with Limitless, your perspective, just your journey has been fantastic. So for anybody who wants to check out Limitless, check them out at limitlessnetworkmarketing.com. And then as always, a shout out to, one of our favorite brands, RC Cola. You'll never be Coke, and let's be honest, you're not even Pepsi, but you showed Joe Cola who's king. Congrats on that. And check us out.